So,
Well, and that's the thing sometimes. It seems that we hold ourselves back by this definition of excellence that says excellence is what the top level professional with the top level gear would do with a unearthly amount of time and money. And I go,
right.
no, no, no.
Right.
Excellence is the best I can do with the time and resources I have available right now.
Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I geek out about the stories we're passionate about in all different genres, styles, and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and I started this podcast in the summer of 2020 at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. As I watched the reaction of my friends, family, and social media circle, I noticed that many people turned to stories for comfort and help in making sense of the craziness going on around them. My goal was to do the same for my listeners. But as I chatted with my guests throughout the first year, I discovered that their personal stories were the most fascinating thing about each episode. Neil Gaiman says, "Fairy tales are more than true not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten." I now know that sharing our experiences with others helps us defeat our own dragons. It is our stories that connect us to one another. Let's see what wisdom today's guest has to share with us. Vance, you contacted me earlier this week, and I wasn't quite ready yet to start recording, although I have some next week. But I was excited to read all of your profile on Podmatch. And so you have so many creative endeavors. I want to hear, we might be here for a while because I want to hear all about them. So today, my guest is Vance Neudorf. He is going to be episode 48. And Vance, welcome to the show.
It's wonderful to be here. I've been looking forward to this. Glad you would have me.
Oh yeah, I'm a sucker for anybody with a good story.
Well, there we go. I've got a few of those. Yeah.
I read about the what was it, 1,000,000 trees that you planted, and I went,
yeah,
oh,
no, I was only half of that. I only got in 500,000. So that was actually what probably got me going on this kind of crazy road that I'm on, where my mind can never rest and I must be creating all the time, because tree planting trains you. I planted up to 2,700 trees a day, and you'd be planting the one you're on, but you're always thinking 1, 2, 3 trees ahead, planning, watching, measuring distances in your mind, and you become this automatic process. But once your mind is free of that and you're good at it, then your mind can go wherever it wants to and wander while you do it. So you're multitasking, I guess, of sorts, but you develop this restless mind that must always be saying, I'm doing this now, but what am I going to do next and next and next? And I never stop.
wow.
It's just always wanting to create or make something new.
Oh, yeah, I kind of understand that, but I was so busy in the fall with teaching. Teaching 2 classes, and my teaching partner and I started a theater club too. And there are all these things that you have to do if you're a club to keep your club.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's getting his master's. So I had to do most of the work. So when the semester was over, I said, I just need to have a break.
Yeah.
And we went, my husband's father celebrated his 90th birthday.
Whoa, good. Great.
December 22nd. And so we went up to surprise him. Yeah, I just kind of slept in a little bit and read my books. I didn't think about the podcast that much.
Yeah.
And so I'm having a little bit of a hard time getting back into the swing of things. So, but it was good that you prompted me to do that.
Oh, no, that's great. And to me, the whole thing, it's seasons. Life is full of seasons. Things come and go, and you're here, you're there. I just happened to be in one because of the recent worldwide issues where I run a large theater company. We haven't had a show for 2 years, right?
I know.
So no shows meant all of a sudden life kind of went, oh, there's some gaps here. What am I going to create and make next?
Yes.
And then I turned 60 last year.
Yeah.
And my kids came to me and said, hey, Dad, you know that book you've been working on for 20 years? Why don't you finish that? And not only that, why don't you just record it as a podcast, an audiobook for us, basically, so that our kids and grandkids and kids can have that with your own voice in it. And I thought,
Yes.
well, that's kind of an intriguing idea. I guess so. And my son's into audio production. I said, okay, I'll record it if you'll mix it down and do the thing. And he said, sure. So we got started on this crazy journey because 20 years ago, I wrote the first book, which was called The Hammer, and put that out there, toured it around bookstores, did the thing. And then I got the job I have now 13 years ago, and all of that kind of dried up a bit. I still kept writing. I still kept doing The Medallion, which is book 2. And so we just started. And then it again, just the way sometimes things unfold, it became, I went, you know what? If I'm going to do this for my kids, I'm just going to throw it out there for the world in general and see what feedback I get. Make it an oral story, traditional approach. I'll record a chapter. I'll put it out there. If someone says, I got that and I understood that, it's just like sitting around the old campfire in 1,000 years ago. And the storyteller tells the story, and afterwards someone comes up and says, loved your story, but that part there, I just couldn't quite get it. And the guy goes, oh, okay, yeah, next time I'll tell it, I'll do it this way. And I've actually taken feedback, gone back in and re-recorded the chapters.
Oh.
So in the oral story tradition, the new listeners coming in don't know that they're now part of a rework story. But they're also going to have their chance to say whatever. And and the reworks are not like a total story change and a character dies that didn't die before. It's massaging it. It's bringing in new details and character development to help answer some of those questions. It's a real fun project. It's really cool.
Do you do voices and things like that?
Oh, that's the dangerous one. Okay, so the kids say, Dad, do, and I said, I go on stage and I've played Bumble and I just did Warbucks a few years ago, and I can do the acting part, but I don't really consider myself a character that way. And so I said to them, I'm just going to read it. And they said, oh, that's good. That's fine. So I started reading and I'm going along, and all of a sudden I would get to what I wrote without even thinking, and it says, and his high grating voice pierced the air. And I went, well, I just messed that up. Now what am I going to do? I can't read that and not try it. So then I started trying voices. And then after a while, as it got into book 2 and there's so many more characters, I started losing track of what they were supposed to sound like. So then I had to make an audio file to remind myself. And then even then I found that, I used the wrong voice, and I'd have to go back and re-record it again because it was the wrong one. And I've been pushed to it. So I'll tempt a voice and I'll try it out and I'll email it to my kids and say, this is so-and-so, this is what he sounds like. And my daughter wrote back to one of them, said, are you sure you can do that without hurting yourself? And that was the high grading voice of this rebellious leader guy. It's been fun.
Well, I asked that because I did attempt to do the audio book for my book, The Space Between Time.
Right.
But it's 500 and some, or 400 and something, almost 500 pages.
Yeah.
And I had to do the same thing. I had to record the voices for myself so that I could go back and listen and reproduce them when it came time for them to talk again.
Yeah.
And after a couple of months of that, I said, I'm never good, because I only had like 15 chapters or something. And it's 36 or 7 or 8 chapters. I said, I'm never going to get this finished. Because I was teaching at the same time.
Yeah. All the stuff. Yeah.
And working on my poor second book has been sort of lagging for quite a while. So I asked you that to find out if your experience was similar to mine.
Yep.
Finally, I just said, forget it. I'm going to pay somebody to do it someday.
Well, I came to that point too. There was a few points in where I kind of went, oh, what am I doing? This is silly. And then I'd say to the kids, I don't know if I want, oh no, you have to finish it off. Can't leave it. So then I just set a goal that every morning I would get up, the house was quiet. My recording studio is right there. And I would go in and I would do a chapter. The problem I found, and I don't know if you found this, is when I started reading my own book I started finding things I had to change and edit.
Oh, yeah.
And so on the fly, I'm in there writing a new edit down, recording that, and then going back and adjusting the printed text. And because something would come to me, as I was recording, so it became, I think I wrote the other day on January 1st, I launched my 100th podcast. So that was a hallmark for me after 1 year, 9 months. And I calculated it up, and I had spent an average of 3 hours per podcast to get them ready. Working from about 6 o'clock till 9 o'clock when I would go to work, and sometimes I do say to myself, "You're crazy," and then other times I go, "Oh well, go for it, go with the flow."
Yes. Yes. I used to be an actress, but I haven't done that for a really long time, and I just did not feel adequate to the task. So, but I wanted to say that my teaching partner that I was talking about earlier is a theater professional, and he's had to make work for himself too. So it's been fortunate that he can teach at least one class at the college while he's getting his master's, and hopefully he'll be able to teach more when he finishes. And I can turn over my classes to him.
Yeah, then you'll have lots of time.
Yeah.
Tackle that second book. Yeah, I have. The only way I've kind of kept going over the years is I really admired the British author Anthony Trollope, because he was a postmaster. He had a day-to-day job.
Oh, wow.
But he said to himself he would never let a single day go by without writing something. Christmas, New Year's, whatever. I'm going to write something every single day. So I started doing that and just keeping a spreadsheet. And some days it's really pathetic. It's like, one day this week it was 71 words. Oh, well. I look at it and I go, it's just a discipline, keeping it rolling.
Right.
And then Christmas Day, I set the all-time record of 4,037 words in a day.
Wow.
Which was a weird ride because our whole family got sick, not with the pandemic disease, just a miserable flu. And so we canceled Christmas, or postponed it.
Yeah.
And so Christmas Eve, I was lying up here in the study because I was coughing. So I was just keeping away from everybody, and head was pounding, couldn't look at the computer. And I all of a sudden had one of these flashes, and there's the drag out, write every day stuff. But then there's this time when it converges, and all of a sudden my character started speaking and doing, and the end of the book, which I've never known before, came together. And in the middle of the night, and I just dictated that all into my iPhone and then emailed it to myself. And the next day just started hammering that and writing that out. And it was like, wow, it was so much fun. So much fun.
That's so great. Yeah. Because I have quite a bit written. Yes. But it's mostly, I have two timelines. So it's mostly the Morgan in the past, getting involved in the suffrage movement. And when I first started the book, there was no equivalent movement in the United States in 2014. And then when the Harvey Weinstein thing happened, I got new energy for it. And I wrote a bunch of stuff for Jenna in the present, but I am undecided, and I keep waiting to find out, okay, which of these scenes, or how am I going to start the book, and how am I going to end it? And then when the pandemic happened, it was like, do I include the pandemic? So I have these questions that are not quite answered.
Yes.
And I can't, I have started going through and kind of trying to organize it a little bit. Of what I have so far. The podcast has kind of, I won't say it's more interesting, or I can't quite describe it. I feel more connected to it. Maybe that's what I should say. I feel more connected to it right now than I do my book.
Well, and that's, I think, because in most of our cases, we're not those big published authors with the big companies and all the rest of the stuff behind us and a big team. Right. We're independent people that are wanting to story. We're story driven. We want to tell a story. We think stories matter. We think they really help and can change lives in that respect. So to be able to talk to it, and that's why I was on a podcast this morning from London, and just had a great time, because we can kind of encourage each other and kind of go, oh, that's what you're doing? Yeah. Okay. I'm doing this. And I think that's our community. The podcast world has opened up a lot of really good community for the independent authors. And we can kind of bounce things off and say, yeah, this is what I'm trying. And yeah, keep at it. Don't give up.
Yes, because I have talked to several authors, and some of them are former students of mine,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them are like college friends. But yeah, that has been really helpful to hear their process. And then it's like, oh yeah, okay. So in a way, it's igniting my desire to go and finish the book again. I'm not teaching anything for 8 weeks starting
Oh,
next
good.
week.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to do some more connecting with people on social media, although I've kind of I sort of took a step back from social media for quite a while. So I'm going to have to rework that as well. But I want to connect and just say what are you doing that's creative?
Yeah.
Because I don't know, this pandemic thing is there are so many people who are not, their lives are turned upside down. And some of them are just going, oh, I'm creating work for myself. And I like to hear about that. I like to
Yeah.
hear what they're doing, like what you said you were doing. I haven't listened to any of your book yet, but I said, oh, it sounds really interesting because especially since it's for middle grade and up. And
Yes.
every once in a while, I like to read those kind of books.
Well, yeah,
So,
and it definitely, middle grade and up. And this morning we were talking about that because, like unto The Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings, the first book I wrote, these are books written for my kids when they
mm-hmm,
were younger.
mm-hmm,
But then, of course, the kids start to grow up and the themes have to change because they're engaged in different things. So from the first book, which would definitely be middle grade, it hit young adult really quickly in book two
mm-hmm,
because he's dealing with the issues of teen addiction, essentially,
mm-hmm.
is what that book, where that book goes in a fantasy world, in a very particular context, and with what he's wrestling with. But it gets suddenly much more intense in the
Mm-hmm.
things that he has to deal with, and to the point where I've had a few younger listeners. One's 12, I think, and I contacted his mother because I got through to the middle of the medallion, about 28, and there's some pretty hard hitting scenes where he's wrestling through this difficult way. And I just said, hey, you might want to listen to that together with him because
Mm-hmm.
it is a little bit more, difficult to work through. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it is interesting to be in there. I think this morning, if I was listening to you on the York radio show, talking about, stories that say something, that communicate and engage us at a human level on what are we struggling with, what are we going through, what can we learn, where is it all coming together. And I'm totally there. I'm not writing a story just for a story. I want to engage thoughts, some high thoughts on integrity, leadership,
Mm-hmm.
justice. What does that mean? How do you engage those things, and how do you move through the story or your life that way? So, maybe that's a good goal. Maybe it'll let me down in the long run. I don't know, but I'm sure I'm having a good time doing it.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, because the stories that I write are all, it's all about what's going on in my life mostly.
yeah,
And so maybe that's the disconnect there because I'm not involved in the women's movement right now, except that, well, I have been, I suppose, in the past in a small way, because my first degree is religious studies and I was the only woman in the program. And so that was
yeah, yeah,
objectionable,
yeah,
objectionable to some men
yeah.
at the,
So you've been through it.
yeah.
Yeah,
But how to translate that. And also, yeah. So I wanted to get down to, because I'm always self-evaluating. So I'm trying to figure out how mostly Jenna, can do her self-evaluation.
yeah.
Um, and I just haven't quite I need something to hook it to
Yeah,
something.
I wrote a chapter actually this morning where, to me, the way I not resolved it, but the way I brought it around was that this younger girl, becoming a young woman, Kate, one of the main protagonists in the story, is basically upset about something and ruminating about it. And this older woman comes along, much older, and sits beside her. And then they have this conversation. So you have the wise woman with all this experience answering questions, responding back and forth. And in that give and take, it just some really cool things were spoken. It's an early draft right now, but I went and I thought, yeah, I kind of like what's going on there. It was a device that allowed me to show this transference of culture and information from one generation to the next. And it was just having had that character really opened up that door.
Oh, yeah, that is helpful. Well, yeah, and Jenna does have a mentor, her mom's best friend. Her mother, both her parents are dead, but she has an artist friend who was her mother's best friend, and she's sort of like a second mother to her. So I haven't quite figured out, because I need to flesh that character out more too. And I just actually what I just need to do is sit down every day and just work on it a little bit every day.
Yes.
And I haven't disciplined myself to do that again. I did that on Space Between Time, but now I have to get back and do it again.
Yeah, I find my, whether or not it's contrived or not, my spreadsheet is very helpful because it's quite a complex spreadsheet. It has my goal, my overall writing, and it gives me percentages of where I am today. And I can see that moving slowly up. It's got a whole bunch of charting features and functions in it. And then month by month, it'll tell me in this month, I had this many words in per hour, this many words in per day. And then at the bottom, it'll say, you have this many days to go to reach your goal.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So it's a piece that just kind of keeps me, I guess, engaged. I can't let a day go by, because if I do and a blank shows up in there, I feel like, oh, I lost a day. I better not. So every single day, even if it's just a matter of going through a chapter I've already read, if I'm tired or whatever, I'll at least read a chapter I've already read, written, and do some editing. And it might only add up to 50, 60, 70 words. Other days, it just starts to flow. This morning was 850. Things change. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way to think of it and to do it. I guess I kind of was wanting to do what a couple of my writer friends that I met through Facebook do. They are partners. They both write fantasy, and one lives in New Jersey, one lives in Kansas, and they'll get on the phone with each other and do little writing stints,
Yeah.
And so I was kind of looking for, because the two women that in my area that I used to do that with both died in 2020, I think it was.
Right.
It wasn't from COVID. It was just or maybe it was, one of them might have even died in 2019. And I haven't had anybody to bounce things off of. But the student that I was talking about is a writer. She's a teacher and a writer. And she sent me a couple of her poems and said, would you read these over? I'm going to submit them to a magazine. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so great. I don't know much about poetry, but sure, I'll look them over. And then she said, and if you want me to read over your stuff, and it was like, oh, yay.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a number of groups out there that will provide beta reading and that sort of thing. I've had some really great editors over the whole stint, comes and goes, different ones. I worked a little bit with a story developer, which was a really eye-opening experience. That I had someone that's not grammar, but they're definitely almost more movie style on your plot and how it's going, what the holes are, that sort of thing.
Right.
So that was really fascinating. I would love to do more of that. But of course, all of those things are a cost. And in my current business model, I give it all away free. So there is no revenue.
Well, and if your theater company's not working, you don't have any income at the moment, or if you have a small stream of income, that's always hard.
Yeah. I mean, they say the necessity is the mother of invention. But when it comes right down to it, if you get too much necessity, it'll kill creation because you're just too stressed about other things. Your creative spot has to have a little bit, has to have some degree of peace and what should we say, margin in it, so that you can have that time. I'm fortunate in the sense that I do have a commute to work. It's about 42 minutes and it's the easiest commute in the world. I don't put on the radio. I don't listen to anything. I just think for 42 minutes, coming and going, and kind of think through things and things that might strike me and make me kind of sit up. That's how one of the other projects I do is I worked with this. You have a background in religious studies. You probably know the book of Ecclesiastes.
Oh, yeah.
But to me, it's a bad title. It's actually the Wisdom of Kohelet. That's the only name he uses. And so I've loved this thing for 30 years. It took me 5 years to translate it. By the time I was done, I had it memorized. So then my theater friends and I turned it into a show where I had a costume and I had an open flame and I would cook a dish from Iran called Mirza Hessameh. And then I would recite all 5,000 words in one long soliloquy.
Wow.
While cooking and chopping and stirring and doing all the rest of the stuff. It was a real challenge. But I memorized that on that commute because I, had the time, and I just kind of bit by bit over 5 years, put it into my brain. And then because I was so much into his character, wearing his robes, which my costume department designed for me, putting the show on, I began to wonder, what's his backstory? And then I created and wrote the novelization of Kohelet's life. And that's free online too. It's thescroll.ca, and anybody can read that book or listen to it if they want.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Well, I understand that because when I was teaching in Douglas, it's an hour from our house to the high school.
Yeah.
I was teaching at the high school. So I didn't do radio or anything either. Because I would think about what I was doing for the day with my students and the things, because I was teaching English at that school. I didn't get to teach theater except for one class. So, but I had enough credits that I could teach English. And so I was teaching American Lit, and I was thinking, I would think about what we were reading and discussing and that kind of thing. But also it was something about the San Pedro River that flows up from Mexico. It's just a little way from us. It seemed like I would get the best ideas when I was crossing the San Pedro River.
There you go.
And I got some about my novel when I started it, it was when I was driving.
That's that creative space. And sometimes it's just finding that spot. And like you said, not wasting it with something trivial. It's just going to, kind of clog your brain and take away your time, but actually thinking and coming up, and then those sparks come along, and before you know it, you've got something, and away you fly with it. So yeah, that's great.
So maybe that's part of what I'm missing, because I don't drive now very much.
Right.
If I'm only teaching one class, I'm only going into town one day a week instead of 5.
Right.
So, because the other city is Sierra Vista. It's north of us, and it's half an hour away. So.
Okay.
I don't listen to the radio or anything. I just, I just think about what I'm going to do in class, and
no, that's good time. I think if you can find that kind of alone time and actually make good use of it, that's pretty precious for sure.
So I'm going to have to translate it into something at home where I have time to think about what am I going to do today. So now I'm going to go back to the tree planting. Why did you plant the trees? What were you involved in?
Oh, it's because that was northern British Columbia, which logging is a huge aspect of it, right? So, they're logging the entire place essentially. And then as they clear out blocks of logged lumber, enroll the summer students, which are usually younger folks. I and my sisters and a whole bunch of other people, we all did it. And then we would then plant trees, and you get paid per tree. It's not per hour. So that's why you work very long hours. It's a summer job. You're trying to make money for school, and you just go. And so you just put your head down, and it is lonely. It's hard. I've never cried so much in my life, when you're just, you feel totally crushed and beaten at times. But yet at the same point in time, once you kind of break through the other side, you find out what you're capable of, and all of a sudden the lights come on and you go, man, okay, I can do that. I can do that. And you're not too afraid to try stuff. It's just there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That physical labor thing. Yeah. I did a little bit of that when I was in college for summer work. And at the end of the day, I would be so tired. My body would hurt.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's been fun.
Cool.
Because of my background in theater, I like this behind me. There's the actual hammer.
yeah,
So
for your novel. Yeah.
yeah, so because I love theater, I make my own set pieces. Even though it's a book, I still want to own it and feel it. So I create the set pieces so I can hold them, look at them. These just arrived the other day. This is the actual
Oh
medallion.
yeah.
Yeah, that
That
came from.
isn't that on that image on your website?
Yeah, that's a piece
Yeah.
that I designed,
Oh,
and
that's
then
gorgeous.
yeah, I just had it made. It's in sterling silver in London, and it just arrived 2 days ago. And I went, oh, I kind of like that. That's nice. I don't know what I'm going to
Yes.
do with it, but just to have it as a tangible piece I think is great fun, and it's creative, and it just adds a new level, a new nuance to the writing of these books to be able to say, oh yeah, I made that thing.
To go with the book. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah. Well, I didn't make anything, but I did base Morgan on my ancestors because
Oh, cool.
I grew up at the end of the Oregon Trail.
Oh, nice.
So she goes on the Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Write what you know, I guess, as that's what
that's
they always
right.
say. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's cool. So now there was something else that I wanted to do. You have a bunch of other creative endeavors.
Yeah, there's all kinds of different projects and things at any given time. I love to build. I love to create. I like to make. I live in a very quiet little town. Three Hills is the name because there
Oh,
is three hills.
uh-huh.
It's kind of a strange little place. And out my window that's in front of me, I can see 10 miles out to the knee hills, the foothills, the mountains are way out there. And I have this very quiet situation, which is, I think, lovely to have that kind of reflective space. So this last year, during this whole kind of downtime, I always wanted to do timber framing. So I got some huge timbers and I made a big gazebo and then put a wood burning fireplace in it. And now it's a
Oh,
lovely writing
wow.
spot.
Oh,
So yeah, there's no end of, I will run out of life before I run out of ideas. I know that for certain.
well, that's a good way to do it, though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Why not?
I think I mean, this is a sad thing, but I was in the production. The Portland has a theater company well, I don't know if it's still subsidized by the city or not, but when I was working with it, the musical company is what it was called, but I think they call it the musical theater company now. And I was in a production of Dark of the Moon. And somebody said, oh, there's this whole legend about, somebody's going to die. Somebody from the cast is going to die when you do that play. And we're all like, oh, yeah, ha, ha, ha. Well, someone did.
Oh boy.
While we were in the middle of the run. And
Wow.
so, and it was sad that happened. But in a way, I was like, he died while he was doing
Oh yeah.
like something that he loved, because they had just gone, he and some other people had just gone to a school to do a performance,
Yeah.
and he died at the end of the performance. And it was like, yeah, I kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something to be said for, I think we become a society that wants to be safe, but you can also be so safe and sterilized that do you ever live? Do you ever follow a dream? Do you ever take some risks? Do you go into a situation where it's not where you belong? Like my whole world takes place underground in this fantasy world in the core series. And, but I'm not that great in tight spaces. So when my daughter said, oh, Dad, let's go caving. And I said, okay. And we got to a spot in that cave called the Laundry Chute. It's near Canmore, Alberta. And you have to go feet first. And you don't know where your feet are going. You have to bend at a really weird angle to get through. And it's incredibly tight. And the panic attacks that I had at that point, and then even thinking about it afterwards, would put me into a sweat. But I went and I said, you know what? This is her and I, and we've done some things together. Why would I say no? It's not something, it's way beyond my comfort zone, but saying no just seemed like, what am I gaining by saying no? I can stay home and be safe. Whoopee. I got to engage this because the desire is there, the opportunity is there. So, and it played into the book heavily. I write to that scene and that feeling of rising panic, of just terror. of
Oh,
where you're
yeah.
sure you're going to, and you feel like the rocks are closing in and squeezing you, and all those thousands of pounds overhead are just trying to crush you out of the earth.
Yes.
And yeah, no, it was a great experience. Wouldn't trade that for anything.
Yeah, really. Yeah, you challenged yourself and then you came out at the other side. Came out
Yes,
the other side.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
cool. That's neat that you did that with your children. You did things with your children because my father did that too. He
yes,
would he
yeah,
would watch the football games and the basketball games and stuff with my brother,
right.
and then he would watch the movies and the TV shows with me, and we'd discuss them. Of course, we did that as a family as well, but those are
Yeah.
precious times. I just think about that all the time.
Well, I see on your bio that you are a lover of D&D, and we just had a 4-hour epic run 2 nights ago because I play with my son, my daughter, and my 3 grandchildren.
D&D, are you sure you're looking at my bio?
I thought I was. I thought there was something in there that said that you liked some kind of you do a LARPing and that sort of thing. Is that not
Oh
you?
no, that's not me.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's not you. Okay, I must have the wrong one. Anyways, that was that. It's that, and doing something with the kids, I guess, is the issue, or the thought that came
Yeah.
to mind was this ability to do something together, right? So it's pretty
Yes.
cool.
And individually too, because then it makes you feel like, oh, dad thinks I'm special. You
Yeah.
know, my brother thought that dad thought he was special because they would watch these games together. And it was always fun because my dad would take the opposite team that my brother was
Oh, okay.
for,
Yeah, yeah,
and,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then and I don't know what he did with my younger sisters because by the time they were in elementary school, I was out of the house. Because there was a big gap between my brother and the older of the two younger sisters. I'm 13
Oh,
years
okay.
older than my youngest sister.
Oh,
So,
yeah, 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 yeah.
so I was out of the house by then, but I'm sure he did something similar, with them. Just an individual one-on-one kind of thing with them.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I'm not a parent, but if I were a parent, I would try to do something like that.
Oh, yeah. You find it. I mean, again, comfort zone was that where I kind of naturally gravitated to, but when they invited me, I mean, I guess that's the biggest thing is if your kids or your grandkids are going to invite you to do something, even like, hey, will you record your story for us? Why would you say no?
Right.
This doesn't make any sense, right? Give it a try. I mean, sure, I'll try that. Let's see if it works.
Yeah, and it was great that you had a son who could do the audio editing and leveling and
Right.
all that.
Yeah.
Because I have to do that all myself until my husband retires, and then he'll take over the editing part of it.
Yes.
Thank Kevin.
Yeah.
But I mean, I had to teach myself how to use GarageBand, and I'm not an expert, but I get by.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah. So
Well, and that's the thing sometimes. It seems that we hold ourselves back by this definition of excellence that says excellence is what the top level professional with the top level gear would do with a unearthly amount of time and money. And I go, no, no, no. Excellence is the best I can do with the time and resources I have available right now.
Right.
So my book is excellent because it's mine and I did it to the best of my ability with the time and resources I had.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you were saying that you realized as you were reading it, oh my goodness, I need to edit this. Well, the same thing happened to me. And then at one point I said, you know what? I am not going to go back and rewrite that book.
Yeah.
It's finished.
Yeah.
It's finished. Yeah. I'm calling it finished. And Rosie, the woman who interviewed me, her episode with me aired this week. And she said, when she started her podcast, she wanted to read stories, but she also wanted to create them. And part of her said, oh, but I don't know how to do that. And then another part of her said, well, I'll just learn as I go.
Yep, exactly.
And that was kind of my attitude with the podcast. Oh, I don't know how to do podcasting. I'll just learn as I go.
Yep.
I mean, I've done that a lot in my life where, I want to direct this play. Don't know much about Shakespeare. And then Dave comes along and helps me out with that. That's how I met him, actually, I was directing a Shakespeare play and he found out about it and he contacted me. And so, I don't know much about how to teach this class. Oh, well, I'll learn as I go,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and to me, that's the adventure of it all. Is just, yeah, so what? I mean, just because every kid doesn't get to play in the NBA doesn't mean that they don't enjoy playing basketball.
Right.
At their own level with their own people and
Yeah,
their own peers. That's the place where they
exactly.
are finding significance and enjoyment. Great.
And
We don't
community.
have to be. We don't have to be at the top.
Right. And they're finding community too when they do
Oh
that.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
I had a Ivan Bodley was one of my guests earlier in 2021. And he's a bass player. He's been
Hmm.
a professional bass player for a long time, and he plays a lot of times he's a substitute. But he has these certain bands that will have him come and play with them when they need him. And one night, he and a bunch of musicians were playing. It was in the middle of the night, and they were playing in this bar, and there were 20 people or something like that in there
Right.
that
Yeah.
they were jamming for. And he said to one of the women that was playing with him, he said, I'm not sure this really is very significant doing this. I'm not
Mm.
sure we're making a difference. And she said, oh, yes, we are, because we're creating community. So even if it's only with a few people,
Yeah.
because I said to him something like, I only have like 365 followers on my blog, and I've been doing it since 2013. And he goes, but you're creating a community. And I went,
Exactly. Yeah.
oh yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's people out there that will look forward to, uh, pressing the button, pressing play, and listening.
Mm-hmm.
It's significant to them because they go, oh, I like that. And I'm the same way. I mean, my downloads of my book are not going crazy or anything, but there's just this group of people that will come back and say, oh, hey, I like that chapter I did. And that's all you really need.
Right.
I'm not selling it. I'm not bringing in money from it, but these encouragements and people that say, oh, I like that. Or,
Mm.
a question. I wasn't sure about that. What were you trying to, that's gold. That's that
Yeah,
community
it
that
is.
says you're significant, you mean something
Yeah.
somewhere, and it's enjoyable. Why
Yeah.
not? Yep.
Well, yeah. And then you meet people that you can help. But, well,
Yep.
actually, this is someone that I have known since I was a child. But he wrote a sequel to Pride and Prejudice. And over the summer, he sent me a version of it, one of the drafts to read. And I thought it was fantastic. I didn't think it needed any editing at all.
Yeah.
I just thought it was perfect. Well, but he has done some more editing to it. But he just called me last night and said, we sent the manuscript off to this hybrid press, and we got this email back, and they want to publish it." And it's like, oh wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, that's
So
pretty neat.
I got to
Yeah, no,
help a
that's
little bit.
yeah. Oh, exactly. Yeah, it's those small or large wins that come along that kind of just validate you and say, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you've created
Yeah.
something beautiful. I want to look at that. I want to read it. I want to listen to it.
Yeah.
That's nice, right? So
Well, and he also asked for advice. And so I said, no, I don't know very much, but this is what this writer friend did. And this is what
yeah,
this writer friend did. And that helped him. And it was
yeah. No, that's
great.
great.
It was great. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I have enjoyed this. Do you have anything else you want to say before we go?
No, I just enjoyed having a chat about projects and books, and I would just encourage you stay on book 2.
Yes,
Don't
you're
let the
right.
days go by too long.
Yes, I have to start doing it a little bit every morning or something.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
You bet.
Well, thank you
thanks.
so much.
You bet. Yeah, thanks for having me, and we'll stay in touch.
Okay, that sounds great.
All right. Take care.
Before I go, I'd like to give a big shout out to Podmatch, which I call a dating service for podcasters. Since I joined their platform, I have met so many wonderful people from all over the world, and they make the matches so easy that if you are a podcaster or you have a message that you want to share, you might want to consider checking them out. The affiliate link is at the bottom of my show notes on my website at Sage Woman Chronicles at sagewoman.life. Part of what I love about them is that they promote civil conversations. And can't we use that right now? So if you check them out, tell them Lucinda sent you. I'd also like to invite you to my Patreon community, where we will have chats with authors or creators. We'll have member chats about the stories that they love, and occasionally we'll have extra episodes or uncut episodes of Story Power. So please go check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/storypower without the hyphen, all one word. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. And remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.